The snow crunched beneath my boots as I made my way up the curved driveway, clutching the small, meticulously wrapped package in my gloved hands. My breath formed clouds in the December air, and Christmas lights twinkled from every corner of the sprawling mansion before me. Music and laughter spilled from within, a stark contrast to the silence of my tiny room above Mrs. Peterson's garage, where I'd spent the last 18 months of my life. I hesitated at the massive oak door, suddenly aware of my worn coat and the modesty of my gift, a handcrafted photo album chronicling our family's journey. 3 years ago, I would have been inside that house, greeting guests and refilling champagne glasses. 3 years ago, before I sold everything to help my children pursue their dreams. "You're making the right choice, Mom," Emma had said when I signed the papers selling our family home. "This investment in our futures will pay off for all of us." David, my oldest, had nodded enthusiastically. "Once the restaurant takes off, you'll have your own wing in my house." And sweet Lily, my youngest, had hugged me tight. "Your sacrifice won't be forgotten, I promise." I believed them. After their father died, leaving us with nothing but debt and memories, I'd poured everything into raising them alone. The house was my only asset, the culmination of 30 years of hard work. Selling it had provided each of my 3 children with enough capital to launch their businesses: David's restaurant, Emma's boutique, and Lily's graphic design firm. For a while, I'd lived with each of them in turn, moving from one spare bedroom to another. But as their businesses flourished, their lives grew busier. The invitations to family dinners became less frequent, calls went unreturned, and eventually, I found myself renting the tiny space above Mrs. Peterson's garage, surviving on my modest pension and occasional substitute teaching jobs. Now, standing before Emma's grand home, I steeled myself and pressed the doorbell. Through the frosted glass, I could see silhouettes moving about in elegant attire. The door swung open, and there stood my daughter, radiant in a red cocktail dress, her hair swept up in an elaborate style I'd never seen before. Her smile faltered when she saw me. "Mom?" Her voice carried a note of confusion rather than welcome. "What are you doing here?" "I brought a Christmas gift," I said, extending the package. "I thought maybe I could join you all for a bit. It's been so long since—" Emma stepped outside, partially closing the door behind her. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but the chill in her eyes was worse. "I'm sorry, but this is a private event," she said, her voice lowered. "Important clients are here. David and Lily, too. It's not a good time." I felt as if I'd been slapped. "Not a good time? Emma, I'm your mother. And I appreciate that, but you should have called first." She glanced back through the door nervously. "Maybe we can have lunch next week? I'll call you." But we both knew she wouldn't, just as she hadn't returned my calls for the past 3 months. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending and bending, finally broke. The realization crashed over me like a wave. I had become an inconvenience to my own children, a reminder of their humbler beginnings that no longer fit into their polished new lives. I looked past her into the warm, glittering room beyond, where my son David stood chatting with a group of people, a glass of champagne in his hand. Through another doorway, I glimpsed Lily arranging hors d'oeuvres on a silver platter. They were all here, all together, and I hadn't even been told. What I did next was not planned. It wasn't calculated for effect or designed to teach a lesson. It was simply the action of a woman who had finally reached her limit. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and gently pushed past Emma into the warmth of the house. Conversations stuttered to a halt as heads turned toward me. The room fell silent, save for the soft Christmas music playing in the background. "Mom!" Emma hissed behind me, mortified. I stood there in my second-hand coat, clutching my small gift, facing a room full of strangers and the 3 children I had given everything to save. And then, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I placed the package on a nearby table, removed my coat, and spoke in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the suddenly silent room. "Merry Christmas, everyone. I'm Ruth Wallace, Emma, David, and Lily's mother." The silence that followed was absolute. My children stared at me, frozen in shock, as every guest in the room turned to look at them. And in their eyes, I saw something I had never expected to see: shame. But what happened next would change everything. For me, for my children, and for the future of our fractured family. A distinguished older gentleman in an expensive suit stepped forward from the crowd. His silver hair caught the light, and his eyes, kind but penetrating, found mine. "Ruth Wallace?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "The Ruth Wallace who taught English at Westridge High for 20 years? I nodded, taken aback. "Yes, that's me." His face broke into a warm smile. "Mrs. Wallace, you probably don't remember me. I'm Richard Harmon. You taught my son Michael back in 2001. He was struggling, and you stayed after school 3 days a week to help him." He turned to address the room. "This woman saved my son's future. He's a published author now, and he credits her with changing his life." The room remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. I could feel the weight of dozens of curious eyes on me. "I remember Michael," I said softly. "He had such a beautiful way with words. Just needed someone to believe in him." Richard Harmon stepped closer and took my hand. "I've been looking for you for years to thank you properly. When I heard the school had lost touch with you..." He paused, glancing at Emma, whose face had drained of color. "I had no idea you were related to the Wallaces. Emma never mentioned her mother was the Ruth Wallace." Emma stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Mr. Harmon, I didn't realize you knew my mother." "Know her?" Richard laughed. "Your mother is something of a legend among the parents at Westridge. There's even a scholarship in her name now." He turned back to me. "Which makes it all the more baffling why I've been told you couldn't be located for the award ceremony last month." I felt my heart sink. Award ceremony? I wasn't informed of any ceremony. David approached now, setting down his champagne glass. "What award ceremony?" His eyes darted nervously between Richard and me. Richard looked genuinely confused. "The Westridge Legacy Award. It comes with a grant of $50,000. When we couldn't reach you directly, we contacted your family." He gestured toward my children. "We were told you were traveling abroad indefinitely." The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The implications of what Richard was saying crashed over me in waves. My children had intercepted communication about an award, and money, meant for me. They had deliberately kept me in the dark, telling people I was unavailable. Lily appeared at David's side, her face ashen. "Mom, we can explain." "I'm sure you can," I said quietly, the pieces falling into place. The mysterious calls from unknown numbers that my children had dismissed when I mentioned them. The mail they'd offered to collect for me when I first moved out. To make things easier, a woman in the crowd cleared her throat. "Excuse me, but are you the same Ruth Wallace who wrote those incredible essays for the Teacher's Quarterly? I used to read them to my daughter. They inspired her to become a teacher." Before I could answer, another guest spoke up. "Wait, didn't you lead that fundraising campaign for the Children's Library after the fire in 2010? My company donated because of your passionate speech." One by one, people in the room began to recognize me, not as my children's embarrassing mother, but as someone who had touched lives, who had made a difference in the community. With each new revelation, my children seemed to shrink further into themselves. Richard still held my hand. "Ruth, I'm on the board at Westridge. That grant money is still waiting for you. And there's more. We've been trying to offer you a position heading up our new educational outreach program. Full salary, benefits. We just couldn't find you." I felt dizzy with the implications. All these months struggling to make ends meet, working odd jobs, living in a room barely bigger than a closet, while opportunities and recognition had been seeking me out, intercepted by my own children. "I think," I said slowly, finding my voice, "that my children and I need to have a private conversation." Richard nodded understanding. "Of course, but please, take my card. Call me tomorrow." He pressed a business card into my hand. "We have a lot to discuss." Emma stepped forward, her professional smile back in place, though her eyes were panicked. "Ladies and gentlemen, why don't we all move to the dining room? Dinner is about to be served." She gestured toward an archway, and the crowd, still buzzing with whispers, began to move in that direction. When the last guest had left the room, I turned to face my 3 children. Their expressions ranged from David's defiance to Lily's tears to Emma's calculated composure. "Mom," Emma began, "this isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Because it looks like you've been hiding opportunities from me. It looks like you've been lying to people about me. It looks like my own children have been sabotaging my life." David squared his shoulders. "We were protecting you." "Protecting me? From what? A job? Financial security? Recognition for my life's work?" "From stress," he insisted. "From responsibility. You're not young anymore, Mom. After everything you've been through, you deserve to rest." "Rest?" I echoed in disbelief. "In a room above a garage, counting pennies to make rent? That's your idea of rest?" Lily wiped away tears. "We were going to tell you about the award. We thought—" "You thought what?" My voice was dangerously quiet now. Emma stepped forward, ever the pragmatist. "We thought the money would be better used investing in businesses that could eventually support all of us, including you." And there it was. The truth, laid bare. They had taken what was meant for me, justifying it as being for my own good, when really it had been for theirs. "The same way you invested the money from selling my house?" I asked. "The house that your father and I worked our entire lives to pay for? The home where I raised you after he died?" A flash of guilt crossed their faces, confirming what I had begun to suspect. The money I had given them hadn't all gone to their businesses. I remembered Emma's luxury car, David's vacation to the Maldives, Lily's designer wardrobe, all appearing shortly after I'd given them their investments. "Where did the money go?" I demanded. "All of it. I want to know right now." David's face hardened. "This isn't the time or place for this conversation." "It's exactly the time," I countered. "Because I'm done waiting for you 3 to remember I exist. I'm done being pushed aside and forgotten. I'm done sacrificing everything while getting nothing, not even basic respect, in return." I reached for Richard's card in my pocket, a sudden calm washing over me. "Tomorrow I'm calling Richard. I'm accepting that job. I'm claiming that award money. And then I'm going to make some changes in my life, starting with how I allow my own children to treat me." Emma's eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean?" I met her gaze steadily. "It means I'm taking back control of my life. And it means the 3 of you have a choice to make." Just then, the dining room doors swung open and a server appeared. "Ms. Wallace, your guests are waiting. Should I serve the first course?" Emma looked torn between her party and the family crisis unfolding in her living room. "Yes, please do. We'll be right there." After the server disappeared, she turned back to me, her voice low and urgent. "Mom, please, can we discuss this tomorrow? My future depends on how tonight goes." I looked at my daughter, beautiful, accomplished, and utterly self-absorbed, and felt a strange mixture of love and disappointment. "Your future has always been more important to me than my own, Emma. That ends tonight." With that, I turned toward the dining room where the party guests waited. But as I reached the doorway, I paused and looked back at my children. "By the way," I said softly, "that gift I brought? It's the deed to the family home. I found a way to buy it back, with help from an old friend. I was going to sign it over to the 3 of you as a Christmas gift. Now I'm not so sure." Their shocked faces told me they hadn't expected this, that they had underestimated me for the last time. What they didn't know was that I had one more surprise in store, one that would force them to face not only what they had done to me, but what they had become in the process. As I walked into the dining room with my head held high, I could hear them following behind me, whispering urgently to each other. But whatever plan they were hatching, it was too late. The truth was already unraveling, and by dessert, everyone in that room would know exactly what kind of people my children had become, and exactly what kind of woman had raised them. The dining room fell silent as I entered. Dozens of faces turned toward me, curiosity evident in their expressions. Emma quickly overtook me, slipping into hostess mode as she directed guests to their seats. I noticed with a pang that there was no place card for me at the elaborately decorated table. Richard Harmon caught my eye and gestured to an empty chair beside him. "Ruth, please join us. I'd be honored." As I took my seat, I could see my children huddled in an intense conversation by the kitchen door. Their furtive glances in my direction confirmed they were discussing how to handle the situation, how to handle me. "Mrs. Wallace," a woman across the table leaned forward. "Richard was just telling us about your teaching career. Is it true you once convinced the school board to fund a literature program for at-risk youth?" Before I could answer, Emma appeared at my side, her smile brittle. "Everyone, I'd like to propose a toast before we begin." She raised her glass, effectively cutting off the conversation. "To new partnerships and prosperous futures." Glasses clinked around the table, but Richard kept his focus on me. "You never answered the question, Ruth. About the literature program?" "Yes," I said, finding my voice. "We called it Words of Change. We took students who were struggling and introduced them to authors who had overcome similar challenges. It was quite successful." "Successful?" Richard laughed. "It became a model program adopted by 3 states. Your mother is too modest," he told the table. "She's transformed hundreds of lives through her work." I caught David's eye across the room. He was watching the exchange with growing alarm. My quiet life teaching had never impressed my ambitious children. They'd always seemed embarrassed by my modest career, preferring to focus on their father's more lucrative business ventures, even after his death left us in debt. "Mom was always dedicated to her students," Lily offered, joining the conversation as she took a seat nearby. Her tone was conciliatory, but I could sense her anxiety. "Indeed," I replied. "Though I'm surprised you remember, Lily. You once told me teaching was a fallback career for people who couldn't make it in the real world." A few uncomfortable chuckles sounded around the table. Lily's face flushed. "I'm sure she didn't mean it that way," Emma interjected smoothly. "We've always been proud of Mom's work." "So proud that you never mentioned her accomplishments to your business associates?" Richard asked innocently. "I find that surprising, considering the connections her reputation could have brought you." The first course arrived, momentarily diverting attention. I used the opportunity to observe my children. Their faces reflected varying degrees of panic and calculation. They were trying to figure out how to regain control of the narrative, a narrative they'd carefully constructed without me in it. "Mrs. Wallace?" A man further down the table called out. "I understand you're living more simply these days. Was that a deliberate lifestyle choice after retirement?" I could see Emma nearly choke on her wine. This was exactly the kind of conversation she'd been trying to avoid. "Not exactly," I replied calmly. "After my husband died, I sold our home to provide startup capital for my children's businesses. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "So, you're the angel investor behind Wallace Designs, the Emporium and Savory?" asked a woman I recognized as a local business reporter. "That's quite impressive." "Mom's support was invaluable," David said tightly, joining us at the table. "Though, of course, we've built our successes through our own hard work." "Of course," I agreed. "Though I'm curious about something, David. When you took that luxury vacation to the Maldives last spring, was that before or after you told me you couldn't afford to help with my dental surgery?" David's face went pale. The reporter's eyebrows shot up, and I could practically see her mental notepad filling. "Mom," Emma hissed, "this isn't the place." "Where is the place, Emma?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Your home? You haven't invited me here in over a year. Your office? Your assistant blocks my calls. When exactly were we going to have this conversation?" The tension at the table was palpable. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, suddenly very interested in their appetizers. "Perhaps we should change the subject," Lily suggested desperately. "Excellent idea," I agreed. "Let's talk about the Westridge Legacy Award. The one with the $50,000 grant attached. The one you 3 intercepted and kept from me." The clatter of a dropped fork echoed in the silence. "Is that true?" Richard looked genuinely shocked as he turned to my children. Emma recovered first. "There was a miscommunication. We were going to surprise Mom with it." "On what date exactly?" I asked. "The award was announced 3 months ago, according to Richard." No one answered. "Did you cash the check?" Richard asked, his voice hardening. The guilty expressions on my children's faces answered his question. "I authorized my siblings to accept it on my behalf," Emma improvised. The funds are being held in a trust for Mom's retirement. I laughed. The sound surprising even me. A trust I've never heard of? While I've been working as a substitute teacher and living above a garage to make ends meet? A series of whispers ran around the table. The story was becoming clear to everyone present. My successful children had taken advantage of their own mother. David stood suddenly. This is a private family matter. I don't think it's appropriate dinner conversation. I disagree, said the reporter. As someone who's written extensively about your business success stories, I'm very interested in how your initial funding was acquired and how your investor has been compensated. Our mother was not an investor, Emma insisted, her professional demeanor cracking. She was helping her children, as any mother would. As any mother would, I repeated softly. Yes, that's what I thought too. Just as I thought any children would ensure their mother was taken care of after she gave them everything. Lily burst into tears. Mom, it wasn't like that. We just got caught up in everything. The businesses, the social circles, the pressure to appear successful. And where did I fit into that picture? I asked. Was I an inconvenient reminder of where you came from? Something to be hidden away and forgotten? The room had gone completely silent. My children had no answer. Richard cleared his throat. Ruth, regardless of what's happened, the job offer still stands. We would be honored to have you lead our educational outreach program. Thank you, Richard, I said sincerely. I appreciate that more than you know. Emma's face had gone from flushed to pale. A job? Mom, you don't need to work. We can take care of you. The way you've been taking care of me for the past 18 months? I asked. No, thank you. I prefer to take care of myself. David leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. Mom, please. You're embarrassing us in front of everyone. I'm embarrassing you? I felt a surge of indignation. I've spent the last year and a half living in poverty while you three lived in luxury, using money that came from my sacrifice. And you're worried about being embarrassed? The main course arrived, but few people seemed interested in eating now. The drama unfolding at the table was far too compelling. Perhaps, suggested an older woman at the far end of the table, your children simply didn't understand how difficult things were for you, Ruth. Communication works both ways. I appreciated her attempt at diplomacy, but I wasn't about to let my children off the hook so easily. I called each of them weekly, I said. I told them about the leaking roof in my room, about choosing between heat and food some months. Emma told me she was too busy to talk. David suggested I budget better, and Lily promised to visit but never showed up. Lily's tears flowed freely now. I meant to, she whispered. I just got so caught up. In what? I asked. What was more important than checking on your mother? Building something meaningful, David answered, a flash of defiance in his eyes. Creating businesses that will last. Establishing ourselves. Isn't that what you wanted for us? I wanted you to be successful, yes, I acknowledged. But not at the cost of your humanity. Not at the cost of your integrity. That's not fair, Emma protested. We've worked incredibly hard, with a significant head start that came from my sacrifice, I pointed out. A sacrifice you've never acknowledged or respected. I reached into my purse and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, I extracted a faded photograph. The four of us standing in front of our family home, arms around each other, smiling. It had been taken the day after your father's funeral. Do you remember what I told you that day? I asked, placing the photo on the table. They stared at the image, silent. I said we only have each other now. We have to take care of each other, I reminded them. I kept my end of that promise. I gave up everything for you three. And in return, you pushed me out of your lives the moment I became inconvenient. The silence that followed was deafening. Around the table, guests shifted uncomfortably, witnesses to a family falling apart. Then, from the doorway, a new voice spoke. Well, this is certainly not the Christmas dinner I expected to walk into. All heads turned toward the entrance, where a tall, distinguished man in his 60s stood, a wrapped gift in his hands. His silver hair was dusted with snow, and his kind eyes were fixed directly on me. Hello, Ruth, he said softly. It's been a long time. I felt the blood drain from my face as I recognized him immediately. Charles Montclair. My first love. The man I had been engaged to before I met my children's father. The man who had recently reached out to me after reconnecting through a mutual friend. Charles, I breathed. I didn't think you were coming back to town until next week. He smiled. I finished my business early. I wanted to surprise you. He glanced around the tense table. Though it seems I'm not the only one full of surprises tonight. Emma stood quickly. I'm sorry. Who are you? Charles extended his hand. Charles Montclair. Your mother and I were close once upon a time. We've recently reconnected. I could see the wheels turning in my children's minds. They had no idea I'd been in contact with anyone from my past, much less someone who clearly held me in high regard. Mom? David began cautiously. You never mentioned… There's a lot I haven't mentioned, I replied evenly. Just as there's a lot you haven't asked. Charles surveyed the scene with perceptive eyes. I gather I've interrupted something important. You have no idea, Richard said, standing to shake Charles's hand. Richard Harmon. I'm an old friend of Ruth's too, though in a different capacity. Please join us. I think Ruth could use another ally at the table. As Charles took the seat that suddenly appeared beside me, I felt a strength return that I hadn't realized I'd lost. Flanked by two men who clearly valued me for exactly who I was, I found the courage to finish what I had started. My children believe I need their protection, I told Charles. They've been protecting me from job offers, award money, and apparently my own independence. Charles's expression darkened. He turned to look at my three children, his gaze assessing. Is that so? Emma, always the quick thinker, attempted to regain control. Mr. Montclair, you've walked into a complicated family discussion. Perhaps we could continue this another time? Charles smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Actually, I think my timing is perfect. You see, I've come with some news for your mother. News that might change everything. All eyes turned to Charles, including mine. This wasn't part of the plan we'd discussed when we'd spoken last week. What news? I asked, suddenly apprehensive. Charles reached for my hand across the table. The investment opportunity I mentioned? The one I thought might take months to arrange? It's been approved. The funds are available immediately. David leaned forward. Investment opportunity? What investment opportunity? Charles turned to him with cool politeness. Your mother asked me not to discuss it until it was finalized, but since we're all being honest tonight, he looked to me for permission. I nodded, curious myself about the expedited timeline. I'm the managing partner of Montclair Global Investments, Charles explained to the table. We specialize in educational technology and programs. Ruth shared some of her innovative teaching methods with me, and I recognized their potential immediately. We're prepared to fund a complete educational platform based on her work. Emma's business instincts kicked in. What kind of funding are we talking about? $2 million, Charles said calmly. With Ruth as the majority stakeholder and creative director, the number hung in the air like a physical presence. $2 million. More money than I had ever imagined having access to. More than enough to change everything. My children stared at me, shock evident on their faces. The mother they had dismissed as financially naive, professionally irrelevant, and socially embarrassing was being offered a multi-million-dollar business opportunity. You never said anything about this, Lily whispered. No, I agreed. I didn't, because somewhere along the way, I learned that my achievements and opportunities weren't valued by the three people I valued most in the world. So I stopped sharing them. The realization of what they had lost, not just financially, but in terms of relationship and trust, seemed to be dawning on my children's faces. But before they could respond, Charles dropped one more bombshell that would force them to question everything they thought they knew about their practical, predictable mother. There's something else you should know, he said, his eyes never leaving mine as he placed a small velvet box on the table. Something that might explain why I was so eager to fund Ruth's vision. The velvet box sat between us like a silent question. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Surely he wasn't about to… Charles, I whispered, what are you doing? His smile was gentle. Something I should have done 40 years ago. Emma's voice cut through the moment, sharp with suspicion. Mom, Who exactly is this man to you? I looked at my daughter, seeing her clearly, perhaps for the first time in years, not as my accomplished child, but as a woman who had lost her way. Charles was my fiancé before I met your father. Fiancé? David's voice cracked with disbelief. You never mentioned being engaged before Dad. There are many things I never mentioned, I replied quietly. Many parts of myself I set aside to be your mother, but that doesn't mean those parts cease to exist. Charles opened the velvet box, revealing not a ring as everyone expected, but a small golden key. This isn't a proposal, Ruth, he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement at the collective gasp of anticipation that had rippled around the table. Not yet, anyway. This is the key to my lake house in Vermont, the one where we were going to spend our honeymoon all those years ago. I remembered it well. A stunning property nestled among pine trees, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking crystal waters. In our youthful plans, it had represented our future together. The house is yours, Charles continued. Whether or not you accept the business proposal, whether or not you accept anything else I might offer in the future. It's my way of saying I'm sorry for the years we lost. You're giving our mother a house? Lily's voice was faint with shock. Charles turned to her, his expression hardening slightly. I'm returning something that was always meant to be hers, something that circumstances, and perhaps my own foolish pride, prevented her from having. He looked back at me. I never sold it, Ruth. I could never bring myself to let it go. Somehow I always hoped you'd see it someday. The dining room had gone utterly silent. This unexpected turn had captured everyone's attention even more than the family drama that had preceded it. I don't know what to say, I admitted, genuinely overwhelmed. You don't have to say anything now, Charles assured me. The key, and the decision, are yours to keep. Richard cleared his throat. Well, Ruth, it seems your future is suddenly full of options. The teaching position, the award money, a business opportunity, and now a house. Quite a contrast to what your children had planned for you. His pointed comment cut through the sentimentality of the moment, bringing us back to the harsh reality that had been exposed tonight. My children had deliberately kept me small, dependent, and isolated, while I had always made sacrifices to give them every opportunity to grow. David stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Mom, you can't seriously be considering taking handouts from a man who abandoned you decades ago. Charles's expression darkened. I didn't abandon Ruth. She chose your father over me, a choice I respected, even if it broke my heart. I stepped aside because I wanted her happiness above all else. He looked at me, something her own children seem incapable of doing. That's not fair, Emma protested. We love our mother. Love without respect isn't love, Richard observed. It's possession. I raised my hand, silencing the brewing argument. Enough. This has gone far beyond what I intended when I came here tonight. I looked around the table at the guests, many of whom were now openly fascinated by the unfolding drama. I apologize for disrupting your evening. Don't apologize, the reporter said. This is the most honest conversation I've witnessed in years. I stood, suddenly feeling the emotional weight of everything that had transpired. Charles, Richard, thank you both for your generosity and support. I'll need time to consider everything. I turned to my children. As for you three, I think we've said enough for tonight. Emma stood as well, her composure finally breaking. Mom, please, don't leave like this. Let us explain. Explain what? I asked wearily. How you justified taking advantage of my trust. How you convinced yourselves that keeping me dependent was somehow for my own good. Or perhaps how you rationalized spending my savings on luxuries while I struggled to pay for basics. We made mistakes, Lily admitted, tears streaming down her face. Terrible mistakes. But we're your children. Doesn't that count for something? It counted for everything, I corrected her. That's why I gave you everything I had. And it's why this betrayal cuts so deep. David, always the most stubborn of my children, made one last attempt to regain control. You're being manipulated, Mom. This man shows up with grand promises, and suddenly you're ready to turn your back on your own family? I met my son's gaze steadily. I'm not turning my back on anyone, David. I'm simply standing up for myself. Something I should have done long ago. Charles rose beside me. Ruth, my car is outside if you'd like to leave. I nodded gratefully. The thought of escaping this tense atmosphere was overwhelmingly appealing. Wait, Emma said desperately. The family home. You said you found a way to buy it back. How? When? I hesitated, then decided the truth was the only path forward now. 6 months ago, I started tutoring the grandson of the couple who bought our house. When they mentioned they were planning to sell, I asked if they would consider selling it back to me. But how could you afford it? David asked, confusion evident in his voice. I couldn't, I admitted. Not alone. But Mrs. Peterson, my landlady, could. Her late husband left her quite well off, and she's been looking for investment properties. We made an arrangement. She provided the funds, and I'll pay her back over time from my teacher's pension and the income from my new position at Westridge. My children stared at me, clearly struggling to reconcile this resourceful, determined woman with the dependent mother they thought they knew. You did all that without telling us? Lily asked. Yes, I said simply. Just as you made decisions about my life and my future without telling me. A heavy silence fell over the room. The parallel was undeniable. So, what happens now? Emma finally asked, her voice small. I picked up the small wrapped package I had brought, the deed to the family home, and placed it back in my purse. Now I go home and think. About the job offer, about Charles's proposal, about the house, about everything. And us? David's voice had lost its defensive edge, replaced by genuine concern. What about us, Mom? I looked at my 3 children, these adults I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, and felt the complicated tangle of disappointment, hope, and enduring love that only a parent can know. That depends on you, I told them honestly, on whether you can learn to see me as a whole person, not just your mother. On whether you're willing to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. I turned to go, but Emma's voice stopped me. Mom, please, just tell us one thing before you leave. Her voice broke. Can you ever forgive us? I paused at the doorway, Charles waiting patiently beside me. The question hung in the air, weighted with decades of history and the painful revelations of the night. My answer would determine not just my relationship with my children, but the kind of woman I would be moving forward. Forgiveness isn't a gift I can give you tonight, I said finally. It's a journey we would have to take together. The question is, are you willing to walk that path with me? Not as the children who need me, or the successful adults who've outgrown me, but as people who value who I truly am. With that question lingering in the air, I took Charles's arm and walked out of Emma's mansion into the snowy Christmas night, leaving my stunned children and the remains of their holiday party behind. What awaited me outside those doors would change everything, not just for me, but for all of us. 3 months passed like a dream. Winter melted into early spring, and with it, my life transformed in ways I could never have anticipated that fateful Christmas night. I sat on the deck of Charles's, now my lake house in Vermont, watching the morning mist rise off the water. The laptop before me displayed the final draft of the teaching curriculum I'd developed for Westridge's new outreach program. Richard had been true to his word, and the position had provided not just financial stability, but a renewed sense of purpose. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Emma. We're about 20 minutes away, bringing lunch as promised. I smiled, feeling the familiar mixture of hope and apprehension that had characterized these carefully orchestrated family visits over the past months. After that explosive Christmas dinner, we'd established a fragile truce, one that required effort from all sides. The first month had been the hardest. My children, shocked by my sudden independence and the revelations about their betrayal, had reacted in characteristic ways. Emma with calculated strategic planning, David with defensive anger, and Lily with emotional pleading. But I had held firm to my boundaries, insisting that any reconciliation would happen on new terms. Penny, for your thoughts? Charles appeared with 2 mugs of coffee, settling into the chair beside me. They're worth at least $1 these days, I teased, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Charles had been my rock throughout this transition, providing support without pushing for more than friendship. The business partnership had proceeded smoothly. My educational methods paired with his investment acumen had already attracted significant interest from schools across 3 states. "Nervous about today?" he asked gently. I sighed. "A little. It's the first time all 3 of them are coming together. Previous visits have been one at a time." "Good," Charles said firmly. "They need to learn to see you as an individual, not just as a mother they can collectively manage." The family therapy sessions I'd insisted upon had revealed just how much my children had collaborated in their efforts to handle me after I sold the house. What they'd initially justified as protection had evolved into control, then neglect, and finally, outright deception. Facing these uncomfortable truths had been painful for all of us. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" I asked, gesturing toward the manila envelope on the table, the one containing the papers for our family home. Charles covered my hand with his. "I think you're giving them an opportunity to show they've changed. What they do with it is up to them." The sound of tires on gravel announced their arrival. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath. No matter how many boundaries I'd established, seeing all 3 of my children still stirred that maternal instinct to smooth things over, to make everything all right. But I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was Ruth Wallace, educator, business partner, homeowner, and woman with her own dreams and ambitions. That was something all 4 of us were still learning to navigate. They emerged from Emma's car looking slightly uncomfortable in this unfamiliar setting. David carried a large picnic basket, while Lily clutched a bouquet of spring flowers. Emma, ever the coordinator, directed their approach with subtle gestures. "Mom?" Lily called, hurrying ahead of her siblings. She embraced me warmly, pressing the flowers into my hands. "The house is gorgeous. Those windows are incredible." "Thank you," I said, accepting the flowers with genuine pleasure. "It's peaceful here." David and Emma approached more cautiously, their eyes taking in the impressive property. "Quite a change from Mrs. Peterson's garage," David observed, his tone carefully neutral. "Life is full of surprises," I replied evenly. Charles stood to greet them, extending his hand. "Welcome. I hope you had a good drive up." Emma shook his hand with professional courtesy. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Montclair." "Charles, please," he corrected gently. "We're all adults here." An awkward silence fell, heavy with the unspoken history between us. Then David cleared his throat. "We brought lunch," he announced, holding up the basket. "Emma insisted on catering from that new French place, but I added some of my restaurant's new spring menu items too. And I brought those lemon cookies you always loved," Lily added. The gesture touched me. They were trying, each in their own way. "That sounds wonderful. Let's eat out here while the weather holds." As we arranged the elegant spread on the deck table, I noticed how carefully my children watched me, studying my interactions with Charles, noting my comfort in this new environment, perhaps searching for signs of the mother they remembered in this more confident woman before them. "So," Emma began as we settled around the table, "how is the curriculum development coming along?" "Very well," I replied. "The pilot program launches in 3 schools next month." "Mom's approach to integrating literature with social-emotional learning is revolutionary," Charles added. "We've already had interest from educational publishers." David raised an eyebrow. "Still feels strange to hear our mother described as revolutionary." "Only because you never bothered to ask about her work," Charles observed mildly. I shot him a warning look. We had agreed to remain civil, regardless of provocation. "That's fair," David acknowledged, surprising me. "The family therapy sessions have made it pretty clear how little attention we paid to Mom's professional life." Lily nodded, her eyes downcast. "We saw what we wanted to see. A mother who existed only in relation to us. And now?" I asked quietly. Emma met my gaze directly. "Now, we're trying to see you as you are. Not just our mother, but a woman with her own life and accomplishments." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It was all I had wanted, to be seen, to be valued for my whole self. I reached for the manila envelope. "That's why I asked you all here today, to discuss the family home." Their expressions tensed immediately. "We know we have no right to make any claims on it," Emma said carefully. "Not after what we did." I opened the envelope and spread the papers on the table. "I've set up a trust. The house will be held in it, with all 4 of us as beneficiaries. None of us can sell without unanimous agreement. They stared at the documents in shock. But why? David asked. After everything, why would you include us? I took a deep breath. Because that house represents our family history, the good and the bad. Your father and I raised you there. It's where we became a family. And despite everything that's happened, we are still family. Mom, Lily whispered, tears streaming down her face. We don't deserve this. This isn't about deserving, I explained. It's about healing. About finding a way forward that honors our past without being trapped by it. Charles squeezed my hand supportively, and for once my children didn't bristle at the gesture. There are conditions, I continued. The trust includes provisions for regular family meetings, continued therapy, and financial transparency. We all contribute to maintenance costs according to our means. Emma nodded slowly, her business mind already processing the practical aspects. It's fair. More than fair. It's a second chance, David said quietly. One we didn't earn. Sometimes, Charles observed, the most valuable gifts are the ones we don't deserve. I looked at my 3 children, flawed, complex adults who had hurt me deeply, yet remained irreversibly connected to my heart. I'm not giving you this because I've forgotten what happened. I'm giving it to you because I remember who we were before, and I believe in who we might become. Lily reached for my hand across the table. Can you ever really forgive us, Mom? I considered her question carefully. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Lily. It's a process. One we'll work through together day by day. David raised his water glass. To new beginnings, then. And to our mother, who taught us the hardest lesson of all by finally standing up for herself. As we clinked glasses in the spring sunshine, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about our future as a family. Later, as Charles and I stood on the deck watching my children walk along the lake shore, deep in conversation with each other, he slipped his arm around my waist. You know, he said softly, that velvet box didn't just contain a house key. I looked up at him, warmth spreading through my chest. I was wondering when you might mention that. He smiled. I thought it might be wise to let the family drama settle first. But whenever you're ready to see what else was in there, just say the word. I leaned against him, watching my children skip stones across the glassy lake surface. They were trying, really trying, to become better people, better children. And I was becoming a better, stronger version of myself. I think, I said, turning to face the man who had waited 40 years for a second chance, that I'm finally ready for whatever comes next. As the sun sparkled off the lake waters and my children's laughter floated up from the shore, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice, but truth. In finally standing up for myself, I had given my children the opportunity to stand with me, not as my caretakers or dependents, but as equals on a shared journey of growth and redemption. And that, perhaps, was the most precious gift of all.